Welcome back. Full disclosure, yes, I've been absent once again. Welcome to the world of my YouTube channel. So it's been a few weeks since we made a video. I think the last video we made was the 10 weeks out point where we trained at King's Gym. That was a highlight of the prep for me. A great period of time, feeling good, starting to lean out, starting to see the visual progress. Energy was obviously still there, and motivation was high. So it was, of course, a good period of time. So hopefully, you enjoyed that episode and witnessing me fumbling my way through posing. We made a lot of improvements over the following weeks. Posing improved a lot. I'll throw in the check-ins over the last few weeks here. Maybe towards the end of this video I'll provide a bit of a weekly compilation of where we went from the last time that I spoke to you guys. But there are some more important things to be discussed here. A lot's changed, and we will no longer be checking in towards the goal of competing in August with 2 Bros Pro. This decision is one which people have opinions about. I'm absolutely fine with that. I'm aware of the sport that we're in. I'm aware of the tropes that exist around mentality, resilience, and the onus on the fault being on the competitor for these issues, and absolutely I don't shy away from that. This video won't be about me making excuses. However, there are some things which come along with the sport and the act of pursuing bodybuilding which are not discussed adequately on any platform, especially not YouTube, where I feel personally most people get their information, their insights around bodybuilding, fitness, competition prep, because quite simply, outside of speaking directly to a coach that you pay, there aren't really many options to get that kind of level of insight, especially not from the level of qualified professionals online or people going through it themselves. Obviously, most people who are competing are also looking to make a name for themselves, which means that the likelihood is they are documenting that process on YouTube, as I was. Now, first of all, before I get into all the reasons why, and when we delve into that, because this is something which I'll be talking about more and more as time goes on. It's something which, although I'm comfortable talking about, I am not necessarily on top of completely. I was sat here, this is the 17th of July, 7:30 in the morning, 7:38 to be exact. So it's only about 2 or 3 days after we actually made the decision to pull out of this competition. So there are still things that we're dealing with, still things that I need to personally get my head around and fully come to terms with, for me to be able to then provide the information to you, be comfortable enough in my approach to tackle those issues going forward, and to give you the insights that you need to tackle the same issues, because I guarantee there are lots of people here who are dealing with those exact issues. And if you've been in a prep and you've been suffering, I'm pretty sure that you'd have suffered with one of the things which spurred this decision on. So I do not believe myself to be unique or to be uniquely hard done by during this process. However, I do believe that due to my motivations for doing this individual competition, the right call was to step back. So how have the last few weeks been since we sort of caught up, and then running up to when that decision was made? Well, very good. We ended up going from, obviously the off-season peak where we started in February was 212 pounds. We got down to a point where we were 177 pounds. The macros were training days, 200 protein, 350 carb and 50 fat. And then on non-training days, we were sticking around the 200 protein, 175 carb and 70 fat. So calories are at a reasonable place, all things considered. Obviously, preps can go down below 2,000. They can go down, into double digits of carbs rather than triple digits. This process can go much further than we took it. However, As you can see from these photos, this is my last check-in. I'll throw them up here. We were lean, and still am, technically. We got down to, I personally believe, somewhere around 8% body fat was where we stuck. This is the first time of me actually learning my body. This is the first time me seeing my physique stripped bare. For context, for those of you who haven't followed the journey up until now, I was on basically a 3-year perma bulk. The point at which I decided to relinquish my natural status, I was probably at about sort of somewhere between 13 and 15% body fat, sort of in the 170s, I believe, pounds wise. And from that point, obviously we were at a point where we didn't have abs, we didn't have those things, you know. I've never really had abs per se, I've never gotten that lean, but we managed to actually come down quite quickly over the process, and we saw some interesting things with my physique, which was really encouraging when the time came that body fat was stripped off. We finally got to the point where, for the first time in my life, I got abs. I got to see an ab, and let alone an ab, I saw a vein on an ab, which is, you know, incredible. For me, it's so stupid, it's so vain, it's so superficial, but welcome to the sport of bodybuilding. What was interesting was, because obviously everyone's genetically very different, everyone's makeup is different, everyone's aesthetic is different, the way that people's bodies look in that lean state is very different. And one of the things that I was actually hoping for, and although it's something that a lot of people do not like in the sport of bodybuilding, was vascularity. I believe that one of the issues with early competitors or young competitors is hardness, is graininess, the muscle, and vascularity goes a long way to compensate for that. Obviously, muscle maturity isn't going to be there when I'm in my 20s necessarily. However, vascularity and having that level of gnarliness to the look can often help to provide more of an illusion of condition, and to provide basically just a more overall aesthetic which can set you apart from somebody who maybe doesn't have that. Maybe they're smoother, although technically that can be more aesthetic. I think when it comes to fighting it out over condition, which is what often happens at the lower levels, you know, that's something that would definitely go in my favour. The other thing that was obviously encouraging was the fact that I do have a small waist. A big part of the goals for this process was to assess where I sit best. You know, during an off season, you blow your physique out, your proportions, although proportions have always been important, and I feel like I preserved that during my whole bodybuilding process, as you can see with the end result of the physique. You know, it's still hard to assess your body and whether you have a small waist when you've got rolls on top of it. So very happy to see that, you know, the proportions for classic are there. I feel like my physique is looking the way I wanted it to when I first stepped into this journey, and I always had proportions in mind. I was always inspired by the golden era guys who carefully calculated their physiques. You know, Arnold was notorious for having purpose behind every pound of muscle that he gained, and that's something which I've always wanted to take into my journey personally, and I feel like I've managed to accomplish that so far. I mean, looking at my physique, you know, I think moving forward, and this is one of the reasons we decided to stop competing for reference. You know, I have spoken about this with Josh in depth. We've spoken over the phone, over WhatsApp. We've you know, had some honest voice notes exchanged, and we needed to assess basically from this year the big goal. What do we need to do to come back and enter the open classic physique division, because I was only going to be competing in first timers? What do we need to be competitive? What do we need in order to make a credible run for an IFBB Pro card? Now, there'll be some of you wincing at the screen going, he pulled out of his first contest. What the fuck makes him think that he's able to sit here with the arrogance and say he wants to get an IFBB Pro card? Well, we've gotten to the point where we can assess what we need. What we need is mass. That much is obvious. I guess it's time to get into the reasons why prep was ended, and also I guess why I am still confident very much in my goals, and why I will not be making a decision about my general aptitude for bodybuilding based off of circumstantial issues and a decision revolving around my health and well-being. Cast your minds back a week ago, for those of you who follow me on Instagram. If you don't, please do, SJR Classic. That's where you're going to see all these honest insights, right? You know, when I wake up at at 2 a.m. We'll get into that. You know, that's where I'm gonna put my rants. Although I love you guys, it takes a bit of time to edit a video, and when you're in a depressive hole, you don't really want to do that. About a week or two ago now, we really started to dig. This is where we came off a refeed week. So we had 5 days of elevated calories, which I was going to document. However, I didn't, because I think that was the start of where my food relationship started to go downhill. And at that point, I think when I stopped recording correlates very well with when things went downhill, obviously, because focus, you know, was clearly missing, motivation was clearly missing, and there was something just not quite right. These are things which I'm looking back on now and they become obvious, but obviously when you're in that process, when you're in prep, your decision-making capability is slim to none. This is why everyone says to get a coach, because from about the 6 weeks out point, good luck making a calculated objective decision. This is where we pushed. This is where we were probably sitting between 8 and 10% body fat, probably closer to 8. The goal at this point was to push down to competition ready, basically, and then feed back up. So we were going to basically try and keep me fed into a show. So I had the promise of some refeeds on the way. I had the promise of a bit of an easier time of it, potentially backing off cardio. Look, I'm very well versed in how those who are coached by the muscle mentors and who coach themselves, so that's Josh Bridgman, you know, Bridgman, all those kind of guys, how they approach a pre-contest. And it's always be ready as soon as possible, try and feed the athlete, not deplete them. And you know, obviously peak week, I'm fully aware that, you know, carbs go up, there's some fat cycling potentially, and cardio gets stripped out, training gets pulled down. You know, there are loads of variables which mean that as you get to that point whereby you basically can't function as a human, luckily enough, you're required to function less. So there wasn't a daunting sense of what's to come, or being scared, or not feeling like I could accomplish you know, what the task at hand over the next 5 to 6 weeks. The issue came when my capability to really put my mind to anything diminished greatly a week ago. For the first night, I woke up about an hour and a half after going to sleep. So this is something which I wasn't necessarily prepared for. I just woke up, I thought, okay, that's fine, you know, go back to bed. I was getting up more and more to go to the toilet anyway, because we were drinking more and more water, because when you're in prep, like, every little tip and trick to get a little bit more energy is needed, and hydration is the massive thing when you're taking thermogenics, when you're constantly fatigued, when you're in a deficit and you're not, you know, pulling that sodium. You know, you need to make sure that your water is high enough to maintain your hydration levels. This will have a big bearing over hunger and energy. I already knew this, so, you know, I was drinking a lot of water, probably somewhere between 10 and 12 litres per day. At minimum, I'd say. I've got a big sort of gallon jug or whatever, which filled up a few times. That was a one-off, I thought, so I went back to bed, absolutely fine. You know, it took a little while to go back to sleep. Thought, okay, I use my phone late at night, you know, maybe it's a sleep issue, or just try and adjust if it happens again. 2 hours later, we wake up, think, right, let's go downstairs, make a drink or something, and have some water, and have a smoke, and that should send me back to bed. This is where the mistake starts to be made. Going downstairs late at night, my body was waking me up for a reason. When you're in prep and when you go into the single digit body fat percentages, what basically happens is your body says to you, during the day, you are feeding me. So you've got maybe an 8 to 10 hour window whereby your body is fed, it's getting calories in. Yes, you may be hungry between meals, but at the end of the day, you've got a period of time whereby you've always got a meal coming up, you're always going to be eating. What happens when you go to bed then, especially if your last meal of the day isn't optimized, if your nutrition isn't perfect to keep your body satiated, even so, your overall calories for the day are going to be lower than the maintenance, right? So you're still probably going to face these issues, just a bit worse. Your body suddenly screams out, and it realizes that if it wakes you up, if you're trying to rest and recover, it doesn't have enough fuel in order to repair itself. It doesn't have enough fuel in order to feel full. It goes into starvation mode. It's asking where the next meal is coming from. It's saying, why are you sleeping? You haven't given me the fuel that I need yet. Wake up and give me food. Initially, obviously, that motivation wasn't necessarily something that I drew a link between in my head. So when I was waking up, I was going downstairs. Sometimes I would be fine. I would always be hungry, always be ravenous. Sometimes I'd be okay, it would be manageable. Usually if I was up for more than sort of 30 minutes, because of the fact that we're in a depleted state, we're resisting some serious hunger pains and cravings. When you're awake at 2 in the morning, when you wake up an hour after you go to bed, then you're up for 4 or 5 hours, you know, between the period of that and you being able to get back to sleep. It's very hard not to eat, and it's very hard not to give in, given the fact that your brain isn't functioning. Because day 1, sure, I resisted. Day 2 was more difficult. Day 3, we cracked. There's no coincidence. The reason is because you've got like cumulative depletion there of my body. You've got cumulative depletion of my mindset. My mentality day by day got worse. You know, not able to sleep. They're all building up. And then once I slipped up once, it was game over. So my cravings, stuff like this, I don't really have cravings. I haven't, and that's been evident since after we've made the decision to stop, right? I don't have stuff that I'm like, yeah, I want to eat this, I want to eat that. Off-plan meals are in fact, if anything, more of a negative potential for me than a positive, mentally that is. But volume was always the thing with me. I've always been somebody who can eat as much as I want. My appetite stops where physically it's impossible to get any more food into my stomach. Yes, my body does adjust, and in the off season, you know, this isn't something that's very prevalent, but I'm very aware that I had this issue beforehand going into this prep, and having that negative food association and relationship is something which clearly was manageable up to a certain point, but then obviously once the physiological demands start to go up, once the mental fortitude goes down, once these side effects, which were very specific and that I was very unprepared for, come into play, clearly it started to rear its head again. But that's the problem. I already had a bad association with food, and although we've gone 6 months by this point of dieting solidly, 22 weeks we were dieting without failure, without coming off plan, without, you know, putting a step wrong, overachieving pretty much everything. You know, the steps were always overachieved by big margins. Sometimes the PBs were being made, the nutrition was being nailed to the gram. You know, we were, I think, 17.5 grams of peanut butter because that's what we needed to hit our macros, right? But once I made the decision to lean into this, it wasn't even a decision, I was half asleep, 3 days on the trot, feeling negative because the scale was going up. You know, we just introduced 7 days worth of cardio, and in my mind I was like, this is just undoing everything. Like, I'm putting more work in and I'm getting less out. And when I was tired, drained and half there, and the hunger pain was just ripping my stomach apart, I had a protein mug cake. Then I had another protein mug cake, and to me that was like 20 grams of protein. Okay, that's all right. We cheated with clean food, we did something sensible. Then we had some oats. Okay, so there's another 30 grams of carbs, maybe some little bits of fats. All right. Then we had, I believe, some cereals, some bran flakes. I'm a fiber addict. Anything high in fiber, I love the taste of. Bran flakes, all bran. Fucking not oat bran actually. I bought that recently. It's horrible, but you know, I'm a junkie on fiber. It's great. But I mean, whether that's a good thing or bad thing when it comes to cheating, I don't know. I know that you meant to choose easily digesting food, so that probably didn't help. You know, it probably stuck in my physique for a while and made me feel a bit more sluggish for longer. But in my mind, I was cheating healthier. So we lent into it. We had an off-plan day, which realistically I told Josh about. I was honest. I confessed to him that, look, this is the situation. This is what's happened. Like, right, no adjustments. Don't purge, don't, you know, go and do more cardio, don't take calories out, just go back to the plan. I sort of went back to the plan after about half a day of fasting, because in my mind that was a way to deal with it. You know, right, reduce the amount of calories throughout the day, try and eat my plan, but if I'm not hungry enough to finish my planned food, that's not a bad thing because I cheated. I think I finished the day off with like a bit of carbs, a bit of fats, you know, just a bit of calories to spare. Few 35 minutes after we go to sleep. This time my legs take me automatically downstairs. This time making a decaf tea or drinking a litre of water did not come into my mind before the period of time where my hand was in the protein. Because something could work before, right? We hadn't really gained too much, I don't think, you know, it didn't really have a negative effect on our body. And I thought, right, okay, well, you know, competitors compete at 250 grams of protein, you know, my protein is 200, it's lower in terms of a prep, you know. Whatever it was, I can't remember. I was half asleep. Whatever I used to justify it, whatever my body told me, I don't know. But the problem is, obviously, during this whole process, we are still depleted. So no matter what I do, you know, no matter what I give it, it doesn't really matter. I'm not going to feel full, not going to feel satiated. If I was using any form of logic to decide what I was doing, then I wouldn't have cheated in the first place, right? Because that's why during the day I'm absolutely fine to stay up and absolutely stick to a plan 100%. Doesn't matter if people are watching me or people aren't. I will stick to a plan during the day. I'm absolutely fine. But it was when these cumulative side effects started to compound, things got unbearable. And so after about 2 occasions of binging, and I mean binging, we probably got about 1,000 calories worth of clean calories. Clean calories. You go 1,000 calories over your plan, it's not clean, is it? On each occasion, and we put on roughly 6 pounds. Got to a point where I wasn't able to hide this anymore, and my mindset was starting to go towards a binge purge. After watching a certain YouTuber, Brandon Harding's videos, I was already aware of what this could lead to. Brandon was very lucky to complete his prep when he faced issues with food. And absolutely taking his example, I could have pushed forward and competed, that's a fact. But he was very lucky when he came out of it. He has managed now to reset his relationship with food, it seems. We don't know what goes on behind closed doors. He was able to get lean and push through and for those issues not to get perpetuated. And I'm not obviously sure whether he was actually dealing with any side effects that were causing him to be pushed towards that binging, or whether it was simply because he had those social occasions which sort of encouraged a binging state. I know that when you're surrounded by the wrong people who aren't at the same stage of their goals, whether they're bodybuilders or not, if they're not prepping, their mentality is very much different, right? I knew what was possibly to come. But if it wasn't for Brandon Harding's videos, I wouldn't. And this is where we get into the side effects and the sleep issue and this binging issue. It's all connected. Sleep is something which is affected below a certain body fat and most competitors deal with. It's no coincidence that also a large proportion of bodybuilding competitors come out of this process with a eating disorder or disordered eating or a relationship with food which is disordered. Don't know how you want to classify it. And yet, when you trawl through YouTube, wherever it might be, the internet, there are only a few places you'll see people talking about this. So considering that a large proportion, I believe somewhere between 30-40% of people come out of competition prep with disordered eating, why is it there's only one competitor who's talking about it? The reason being is twofold, in my opinion. First of all, it's that we have a mentality as bodybuilders. This is a masculine sport. This is one of self-will, determination. This is one of my mindset, my grit, my hard work will beat yours. And so admitting to any form of character fault or any form of thing that you're suffering from, because men don't deal well with the whole suffering dialogue, do we? It's much more of a case of, you probably got control over that. It's probably your fault. We're much bigger on accountability than we are on trying to find reasons why, you know, things don't go our way. And a lot of the time, or people, at least bodybuilders in general, right? So I'm sorry, this isn't exclusively for men, but this is just, I guess, a bit of that leaning into that traditional toxic masculinity mindset. You know, why would men particularly not? And I think it's because of the pride issue. It's because of the way that as bodybuilders we're told to market ourselves. It's because weakness is not something that is accepted at all, because failure is the enemy in bodybuilding. And yet it's happening. The top pros who are paid to do this for a living. Yes, they have had to struggle to get to this point. They have had to do everything that the younger guys who are struggling now have had to do to get to that point. I would never take anything away from an IFBB pro who has earned their position and their lifestyle and the ability to do this sport full time. That's what I want to do, right? So why would I slam that? My point is that when your focus is 100% on bodybuilding, you have the time, the inclination, the energy, often the financial support to be able to address these issues as they come up, to be able to have a hyper focus on your bodybuilding. Whereas somebody who is maybe balancing a full-time job that is stressful, because let's face it, there are two types of full-time jobs or jobs. There's turn up, get it done, get the hell home, and then there's this means something to me, and my personal work means something to me. I am paid very well for what I do. I'm very good at what I do. My career is something which would provide me with much more security and safety and reward than bodybuilding probably ever would. I will not sacrifice that in the short term at all. You know, the only time I'll ever let it come into jeopardy is when I make a decision as to whether I was able to move towards bodybuilding full time. But a bodybuilder, for example, doesn't sleep for a week. They're able to adjust their whole life around that issue. They're able to have the best people support them with it. They are able to set their day up optimally. They are able to remove stresses. They are able to do many, many, many things in order to tackle these issues. These issues may not even be present because, of course, as a full-time bodybuilder, they've probably negated the reasons behind them. Probably have a supplement sponsor who gives them all the sleep aids, who they can just tap up and get, you know, some fade out from. Somebody who works full-time, let's face it, financially, they're probably not going to have as much availability. So one of the things that I did is before this prep, I got pretty much everything in that I needed to tackle the side effects I believed were out there for a contest prep in order to mitigate them. Sleep was never something that came up in my research. We don't have the luxury of waiting, of trying to spend time with trial and error fixing the issue. We don't have the ability to change our schedules around. We have other commitments, you know, which stop us from doing so. A couple of days without sleep, going into a full-time job, which is mentally demanding, stressful. I work in sales. It's a lot of mental activity to try and, you know, do these things. Talk to very high-level people who want to analyze and dissect everything I'm saying on a daily basis. Balancing is just not possible. And I guess balance is overrated food. All of these things combined, okay? The lack of sleep is something which isn't addressed. The overeating is something which is only rarely addressed. The only people who are adequately discussing these issues are bikini competitors. These are not the only two reasons why I gave up, and that's what happened. I gave up on this competition prep. My legs were in constant pain, my hamstrings were tight as hell. It felt like my quad was going to pop off the bone every leg session. I had calf cramps which woke me up at least 2 to 3 times in the night in the week before the sleep issue began. I ended up taking an excessive amount of electrolytes and taurine in order to affect that, which also affected my hydration, which also affected my sleep. I was also on clenbuterol and yohimbine, both of which are thermogenics, both of which are going to affect me, my heart rate, all those kinds of issues. There were many, many, many factors at play. I'm not going to sit here and say that the fact that my body would wake me up, I'm not going to say that there was one issue or it's only external as to the reasons why this decision has been made. However, with no real end goal for this contest, with the only goal to see where the physique was at, to assess what we need to come back and make a run for a real competition, the choice was to either continue digging for 5 to 6 weeks, to put the foot on the gas and double down our efforts with daily cardio already in, so probably a notch up in the cardio, probably a notch down in the diet, you know, trying to recoup where we were. We weren't that far off track, but realistically we would still need to dig in order to stick to the plan. You know, we could do that, we could deplete ourselves, we could push ourselves further into a hole, we could increase the drugs, we could decrease the food, we could do all those things which would probably perpetuate the side effects that I was feeling, so would perpetuate the issues. Even if I got the sleep issue and the eating issue under control, we've then got the fact that how is my relationship with food going to be at the end of it, and the likelihood is I would be one of those statistics, you know, people who was dealing with binge eating disorder, for example, post-show or whatever it might be. And that kind of stuff is a medical issue. That's a very serious psychological issue. That's a very, very deep rabbit hole, which A lot of people who discuss the binge eating issue post-show are people who no longer compete, and I think there's a good reason for that. If I did that, I would be extremely lean. I would come off plan and I would have my show day. My show day would involve a cheat meal. That cheat meal would most likely spark a binge to end all binges. If I was to be at 4%, considering how I feel at 8% when it comes to food, I believe I would be sat in front of you, a man that is 10 pounds heavier, a few days after coming off my plan. The alternative was to pull out, was to accept the lack of importance of this competition, was to put pride behind me and to understand that people will have criticisms and put it down to weakness, and that's absolutely fine. But the decision was a smart one, because it would mean that what we could do is we could very carefully now, while our body wasn't in a shocked and absolutely in pain, vulnerable state as much as it would have been if we'd have pushed on, we had a bit more of a strong position to then position ourselves for an off-season, to then reverse back up a bit more conservatively, to make the food difference less dramatic, and also just to pull back now before we do any actual damage. This has enabled us to rest, to almost lean in. Those refeeds almost served a purpose now. We're resting up. But another issue came into play as well. We are now self-isolating, so for the next week or so anyway, we're only using the home gym, having to get steps in very innovative ways, and cardio is completely pulled. So when deciding between the two, logically it was a no-brainer. Emotionally, it was the hardest decision I've ever made in my life, and I've sunk so much money, time and energy into this contest. If you have seen my earlier videos, and I encourage you to check them out if you made it this far, about the cost of contest prep and all those kind of topics, you know how much this adds up to, and you know that also with my personal issues, I am not the wealthiest man in the world. It's taken a lot of my energy and money dedicated to bodybuilding in order to make getting to where we are now a reality in the first place. However, it's the smartest decision for my health, it's the smartest decision for my future in the sport. I've sunk that money in, so why waste it for a first timers category which leads to nothing, no national qualification. I'm not ready to step on the Open Classic stage. We know what we need to do, so we're going to implement that. Josh has been amazing during this process. As a final note, Josh, my coach, Josh Bridgman, IFBB Pro, he's been understanding, more so than I ever thought he would. He is somebody who is 100% with discipline and consistency. If you follow his YouTube, which I strongly suggest you do, I'll link it down in the description. You probably know him if you're following me. Come on, let's face it. He's been amazing, understanding. As somebody who I was very worried about discussing this with, he even stated, obviously this is something which not everyone is going to admit to their coach, and not many people do, from what I've seen online as well. A lot of this is secretive. It's the binge purge cycle, pretending we're on 200 protein, 350 carb, 50 fat, when really one day we're on 250 protein, 600 carb, 60 fat, and then the next day we're on 150 protein, 50 carb and 20 fat. That's the reality of it. And the fact that nobody had discussed this, and then when I spoke to Josh, he was so understanding. He rationalized how normal it is, and his own advice personally was that we're in the best position we could be, just to step back now. So we made the decision, but there's another decision to be made, and that's about how we address this issue. I'll be spending a lot of the off season basically working on my own relationship with food, trying to reduce the cravings for sweet foods, trying to make sure that most of my meals are bodybuilding typical, trying to improve my relationship with cheat meals, refeeds, off-plan meals, and trying to just generally reset my brain when it comes to the way that I eat and the limitations I place on myself when it comes to eating, and not giving in to times where my body is calling out, potentially artificially, because I'm already fed, for more food. Another element of this off season will be to just put mass on. That's the main goal. I'm currently 190 odd pounds, 13 pounds up from the contest prep low. However, that was a very depleted state. Maybe that 177 isn't accurate, given the stage weight we projected was about 170 to 173 anyway. I'm very happy with my proportions, with the way my physique looks. We need about 8 to 12 kilos of mass at minimum in order to be competitive on the open stage and make a run for a pro card. Well, there's no illusion that I'm going to do this first time. This competition prep was not easy, but we know so much more than we did going into it. I've never gotten lean before, let alone done a prep. So for me, the fact that we got so much information out of it just prepares us better to go forward, to build, to set myself up perfectly for the next prep, to have everything on hand, to be smarter, to potentially change the way we prep in order to accommodate for the way my body reacts. This is something that everyone does, right? The reason why Nathan Diasha, before he goes to Q8, has a kebab like twice a week, a takeaway kebab. That's part of his meals. That's normal. And then you have somebody, Roman Fritz, who, you know, sticks 100% to a clean, perfect diet all the time. You've got different people who do different things. Some people cheat leading up to the contest. You know, some people cannot have one meal off plan. We've got to figure out what's right for us, how to best manage the relationship with food. We'll figure that out. Try and stay leaner during this off season. Try and stay more controlled. Try and focus the energy when it comes to food and nutrition on manipulating the body, not so much on manipulating the mindset. So, look, as an idea of where we go from here, we're reversing back up. Calories are straight away up. 200 protein, 500 carb, 50 fats on training days. 200 protein, 300 carb, and 80 fats on non-training days. Mentally, I'm still not there. It's been a few days. I still am not sleeping. However, it's taking less and less time for me to get back to sleep once I wake up. And although the cravings are still there when I wake up, there's a mental shift that's occurred, because before, of course, there's a guilt purge, guilt binge mentality, right? Once you've binged once, you're already in a guilty frame of mind. That doesn't stop by the next day. So guilt can make you lean into the issue and make it worse by eating more. It's a very strange situation. So no longer is that really in my head. At first, I was very paranoid about this situation, about staying to the plan completely, because I knew that I'd want to binge. And we had our first day, you know, where we made the decision. I asked for a day just off plan, so I wasn't tracking stuff, so mentally I had a break. Had a Domino's, ate to the point where I felt sick. Ben & Jerry's, fudge brownie, large double decadence, which has garlic and cheese in between 2 thin layers of crust. Meat delicious with chicken wings, and I ate 3 of the 4 cooked cookies, all of the chicken wings, and about 3/4 of a tub of Ben & Jerry's. Good going. He's been watching Beard Meats Food challenge eating YouTube channels, but I felt horrible. It was worth it mentally, but I felt horrible. I was in the fetal position on the floor at the bathroom. There was a point where I whispered "worth it" to myself, but it I'm not sure it was, but it's a sight to behold, that's for sure. After that binge, I fell asleep on the sofa. My girlfriend was extremely wholesome. She basically tidied up the living room, took our bunny, our little pet, to bed, tucked me in, put a blanket over me, brought the fan down for me, moved. She just picked my legs up, spun me around, so I was on the long end. We've got an L-shaped sofa, so I was on the long end and took my socks off, and I just vaguely remember waking up at rough parts of that, and it was a very strange situation, but I was like, if there's anybody ever broke in, I'll be screwed, because I was like, do what you want. But I woke up feeling very wholesome, knowing she'd done that, and she clearly, you know, saw that it was necessary. You know, my body was just in ultra recovery mode from that point, and also desperately trying to digest a pint of ice cream. One other thing we learned is you can't throw up Ben & Jerry's when you feel sick. I wasn't trying, guys. This isn't part of this eating disorder discussion, right? This is just, I genuinely just felt sick because I ate too much. The relationship with food, as I say, going forward will change. I've got my first off-plan meal today, but for full transparency, we have our macros, we have our plan. I am not being too militant for the first week, just because I understand that although we need to be careful and controlled, and especially considering I didn't get down to 4% body fat, I wasn't pushing it that far, we weren't depleted water-wise, all those kind of factors. You know, I also still need to be very careful, because this rebound can really make a dent on your off-season progress. But I also know that it's very easy to recover, because most of this weight is going to be water, glycogen, and anything that spills over. Yes, there'll be some fat storage. When it comes to late at night at the moment, I'm prioritizing being very aware of how my body is reacting, because I want to try and squash this late night eating. This is something which last night I woke up, I had a bowl of cereal, so we had something. You know, I've reported this on my plan. Absolutely, I'm going to report this all back to Josh and be transparent, right? You know, people do genuinely still have a tough time with the rebound, and the amount of people who actually stick perfectly to a rebound plan is very low, but my goal is to stay as close as possible to it. Basically just try and be as calculated as possible, while also trying to bear in mind that I have individual needs to try and sort these disordered eating habits out. So for me, that little bit of freedom, hopefully over time, will remove the feeling of restriction, which leads me to then wake up still, even now, and go to the fridge occasions. My food selection will stay good. Look, yes, we have ordered some less healthy foods, but that's mainly for off-plan meals, or because the carbs are so high on training days now that sometimes we just need that big boost of something very palatable to consume. This will still build back up. We're reverse dieting, right? So this feels like a lot of food when it comes to actually eating it. When it comes to the times where I'm not eating it, I still feel starving and hungry, and we'll be battling this for a little while to come. What to expect from me is that this is an extremely long video. I don't expect that many people are stuck with me this long. If so, I will be giving you some tips in order to how to deal with this. I know that I've failed, but there are some pieces of information which I've picked up from my research that go beyond pretty much what's out there at the moment, which is deal with it or don't be weak, which are not conducive to helping people who are in this scenario, because that pretty much leads to either a perpetuation of the issue and the cycle, or leads to people quitting their bodybuilding journey, as I have, potentially without need. Now, there is one thing which I haven't touched on, I guess, which is one of the other major factors as to why I feel like this prep wasn't successful. It's the time frame. Okay, so looking at where I started, this is sort of the starting point. If you go over to my Instagram, I've got a full sort of transformation compilation of as the months go by, but we started off at a very heavy body fat percentage, probably not primed really for a prep, with as I said, bad food relationships. This prep was also up until now, a 24-week process, or 22-week process, which is extremely long if you're looking at a total prep time frame, let alone looking to add 6 weeks onto that. It would have been a 28 to 30-week prep, which is incredibly long. Bearing in mind, we were lean at about 12 weeks out. Leanish, we were ahead by 12 weeks out. By 10 weeks out, we were lean. By 8 weeks out, we're in striking distance. This means that even best case scenario, we're going to be maintaining somewhere between 6 and 8% body fat for a period of 6 weeks, which is obviously not really something which many people can cope with, let alone somebody in their first competition who has these side effects presented, which I am touching on. So there are other factors, there are mistakes that were made. It was our first time doing this. I feel like a 12 to 16 week prep is much more conducive for me, depending on where we leave in off season. I'd much rather prime myself in the last maybe 6 to 8 weeks of an off season, focus really on my relationship with food in that time, bring my body fat maybe into a better balance and strip off any water retention we might be having from being peak bulk. And then, you know, moving ourselves towards a prep where we know that we can go full foot to the floor for 12 to 16 weeks, just get shredded, no fucking about with backing off and feeding ourselves up, you know, except for maybe very close to the competition when we actually need it. I feel like the time backing off, that 5 days worth of refeed, unfortunately messed with me mentally as somebody who, when given freedom of food selection, often goes to the less optimal sources. That is changing, definitely, especially on this reverse. We're focusing on only having a select few times, maybe once per day, where we have those suboptimal food choices. But even so, complete proteins are important, even if that's from whey isolate. So the time frame mixed with the stagnation, the fact that we were ahead, we didn't necessarily pace it, you know, right, were also big factors. So there are other considerations here. It's not just the case that I got a side effect and couldn't handle it. It's the case that I got a side effect and would have to handle it for a long period of time, alongside the other side effects I had. My legs were in constant pain, and I mean achiness pain. I was doing Epsom salt baths almost daily, which is not healthy anyway, especially for hydration. And I had to pull that back, so I'd pulled that back by the time the other issues presented themselves. I bought a massage gun, which I was using 3 times a day. Tiger balm. Physically I wasn't in a great state anyway, so you know, it's not like this was also the first side effects we dealt with. But so lots of things to consider. I will be bringing you some more videos on this topic just over the next month or so. I'm also hooking up with some people to bring you a new piece of content, which is going to be a podcast which delves into the mentality side of bodybuilding. This is something which I wanted to do for a while, and prep has simply pushed me into a mental place where creativity is zero. The desire to sit in front of a laptop for 3-4 hours is zero. You know, and so I need to get back into that routine. This will be the first occasion of me doing that. This is all filmed on my new iPhone, right? I'm not using my camera because even that at the minute is a bit of a mental struggle. It's God, but you know, I'm exaggerating. It's just that at the minute comfort is the priority, and obviously I don't want to launch myself from one thing into the other. I need to be very present. I need to be, you know, in the world. I'm self-isolating at the moment. I'm focusing on enjoying my garden, my new house. I haven't been able to do it because I've been prepping the whole time we've been living here. I've been on a diet. You know, so we get to enjoy the summer. We're still going to the Lake District as planned. Still going to have some of our big cheats, which we'll film, but they'll be planned into off-plan meals twice per week. I have a way that I'm structuring my off-plan meals because food paranoia and a bit of that scared to eat mentality came in, which is strange considering I clearly wasn't during prep. So I spoke to Josh about that. He's been very helpful, giving me just a rough idea about what he'd do, what he'd maybe classify as a binge versus like a good, you know, off-plan meal. Basically what we're going to do is we're just going to try and make sure we're getting like, you know, a decent amount of protein with a main meal, balancing fats. So we're going to have like either a main meal or a dessert, a main meal and a starter. Occasionally we might have all three, right? We're not going to be stupid and restrictive if that's the case, but we just make wiser choices depending on the volume that we're eating. So for example, if I went and ordered an extra large Papa John's pizza, I'm not probably going to order like a garlic pizza bread on the side. We'll probably order some wings or some chicken breast strips or whatever. If I'm going to get a dessert, well, I know that I'm going to want to get a sharing cookie, right? So maybe we'll just get a medium Papa John's. Maybe we'll get the wings because then that'll still be some extra protein. It'll be healthier than getting like a large pizza, and we'll have maybe that sharing dessert or something. Current plan is that we're going to have a curry for main course. I would choose to have pizza once again because I've really been craving Papa John's. The quality is so much different. The starters, the amount of starters and the desserts are incredible. But the closest one is a drive, not a delivery, and isolating, we cannot do that. So it'll probably be something like curry for the main, or a Chinese or something such as that, or a local restaurant delivery, maybe Italian, I don't know yet. But we know what the dessert's going to be. We've got a tub of Halo Top pecan praline, which I tried during prep. Very, very good. Very, very good indeed. So we're going to demolish that tub. My goal is that we don't leave food over from these refeeds, right? We're going to have them in the fridge or freezer in the meantime, but we don't have like half a tub of Ben & Jerry's just sat around, because if I've eaten it once, there's going to be less of a mental barrier to that being normal food. So I want to just get rid of whatever we have, with a few exceptions. We're going to have a tub of pecan praline, Oppo, I think it is, a white chocolate and honeycomb Tesco Finest baked cookies. So then we're having basically a lower calorie ice cream substitute. We're still getting that sugar kick. We're able to eat more food in the dessert versus doing something like having a cheesecake, where it's like, well, that's, you know, we should probably not even have the fucking main if we're gonna have a cheesecake, because my girlfriend makes the best and they are incredibly unhealthy. But you know, there'll come times where I'm like, maybe she makes a cheesecake and I want to just devour half a cheesecake. Maybe I want to have 4,000 calories in that manner. If I want to do that, fine. But maybe during that day I pick leaner sources. Maybe I leave a little bit of fat free in my diet. Maybe I don't, you know, have a bigger main. You know, there are lots of things to consider here, and we just try and be sensible. That's my approach, and I've always said common sense approach to bodybuilding is what this channel is about. It's what it is founded on, is taking the scientific, taking the anecdotal, taking the ideal scenario and mixing it with a little bit of reality, and that is going to be my approach. On that note, this could very well be a 45-minute video at this point, so I apologise for rambling on, but I wanted to give you a full insight as to what the realities of contest prep can be. I'm coming to you now from a more stable point. I've been on the verge of breaking down a couple of times about this issue, about this decision, bounced back and forth in my mind about what to do multiple times, and I have lent on a lot of people, especially my partner, especially Josh. Josh is, for context, I was talking to Josh and he was sending me voice notes about my decision about this prep probably 10 minutes after he got out of a hernia surgery. Josh is, in my opinion, the perfect blend of, you don't want to disappoint him because he's a great role model, he's somebody you can look up to. There's no inconsistencies in his approach to bodybuilding. He is disciplined, he has done what he said he wants to do, he is credible, he's got a thirst for knowledge, he works with some of the greatest coaches in the business, the muscle mentors. That, you know, they are pro creators, and his other clients are, you know, do very well as well, and he's very personable, he's very real. I am very glad that I'm in a position that I am and that I've managed to meet Josh, even though I pay him for his services. And as somebody who cut out a lot of people in their life for this sport, for this journey, you know, bodybuilding is incredibly lonely, let alone if you do what I've done and you properly alienate yourself, you know, for a matter of years now for this. So naturally mental struggles are going to feel more personal, they're going to be more difficult to open up about, and we don't really have many people to talk to about that. So having somebody like Josh, who, although you don't want to disappoint him, you know, you still know that if you tell him about issues, he's going to be there to help solve them, is invaluable. So thank you very much, Coach, if you are watching. Very much doubt you are, you've got better things to do. Mr. IFBB Pro. And then also thank you to just those guys in the community who have reached out, who have talked to me about this issue, who have given me their own experience. And this has led to me knowing that this is an issue that needs more coverage, and hopefully I'll continue to work with those guys and we'll bring you some content in order to open up the doors on the more personal side of this approach of bodybuilding, leverage the position that I'm in, you know, coming off this prep with the first-hand knowledge, and with a few other guys who have maybe been through it or who just have knowledge from a coaching standpoint, to help to bring more awareness, to bring more solutions to the table, and to help to rationalize these issues, because it's not right that the only source of information we have on this are bikini competitors, because they're the only ones with the balls to talk about it. You're not weak, you're not less of a man because you suffer from an eating disorder created by being single-digit body fat, taking your body to the absolute limits of physical capability and depriving it of nutrition for 6 months. This is not the end. You can have your opinions, but I don't do this for you. I want to share this process with you, and I want to use my journey to help you, and I want to bring you along on it. I want you to see what it's like to approach this mammoth goal where a tiny percentage of people actually make something of themselves within it. But the whole reason for doing it isn't because I want to please anyone else or to prove a point, or for the vain reasons people may tarnish bodybuilders with. The reason why I want to do this is to prove something to myself, challenge myself, and to fulfill my potential, because I'm not somebody who can leave that on the table. For me, I know that to do that I need to focus on the next 2 years, and the next 6 weeks, they weren't really a factor. If you've been through anything similar, please do feel free just to drop me a message, right, on socials. SJR Classic is my Instagram. You know, drop a comment below. You know, absolutely, and just feel free to reach out, or, you know, just drop a comment as to what issues you faced in prep that you weren't really prepared for, because this is something which we'll discuss in that content. I'm going to shut up. Got planes going overhead, so it's perfect timing, and we're back. We're back. Welcome back, as Josh says. Catch you in the next one.